Solo Sikoa just hugged LA Knight, and I need you to sit with that for a second, because 6 months ago that image would have gotten this channel accused of running fan fiction. Jey Uso kicked out of a BFT and answered with a spear that nearly ended the match right there. LA Knight climbed up and put him away with a superplex anyway. Jimmy Uso cut it off with a frog splash before the count. Solo Sikoa dropped Jimmy with a uranage. Fatu hit an Impaler DDT and stood over the wreckage doing the gyration that has become his signature calling card, the one that tells you the match is about to get uglier. Royce Keys answered with a spinebuster that put Fatu flat on his back. Then Fatu superkicked Keys and set up to put him through the ringside barrier with a spear, and Keys turned it into a power slam through the timekeeper's area instead, which is the kind of spot that makes an arena lose its mind and makes a physical therapist wince. Jey kicked out of another near fall from Knight, hit his own spear, tagged Jimmy in for a frog splash that almost stole it, then tagged back in himself for a shot at 1D. Solo Sikoa cut through all of it with a Samoan spike. LA Knight finished Jey with a kick and a second BFT. Knight, Solo Sikoa, and Royce Keys win the 6-man. And then, after the bell, Solo wants a hug. Knight hesitates. He does it anyway. That hesitation is the whole story tonight. Let's go behind the curtain, because that hesitation did not happen by accident. Pairing Solo Sikoa with LA Knight is one of the more unlikely creative swings WWE has taken in years, and it only makes sense once you remember where Solo was a year ago. The self-declared tribal chief, running the bloodline through fear, backed by the MFTs, and treated by the locker room as the most dangerous man on SmackDown. That version of Solo Sikoa does not tag with LA Knight. He does not tag with anyone he cannot control. The fact that he is now standing across the ring from Fatu, the man WWE installed to physically dismantle him, tells you how far his stock has fallen inside his own family. Backstage chatter has framed this less as a redemption arc than as Solo grabbing onto the closest available ally. And Knight is a convenient one, given that he has his own history of clashing with the current bloodline leadership. Nobody in that dressing room believes this is a friendship. It reads more like a temporary alliance between two men who each have their own reasons to want Fatu and the Usos to lose, which is exactly why Knight's hesitation before the hug landed the way it did. He is not pretending to trust him. To understand why that hesitation matters, you have to go back through what each of these men has actually been through to get here. Knight spent years bouncing around under different names and different presentations before WWE finally let him be exactly what the crowd wanted him to be. Loud, chip on his shoulder, allergic to authority. Once that character clicked, he went from mid-card filler to a Money in the Bank winner, a former United States champion, and a man who has shared main event space with Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes on the biggest shows WWE runs. Solo Sikoa's path is almost the opposite. He debuted as Enforcer Muscle, the guy who ran interference so other people's stories could happen, and then WWE handed him the single hardest job in the promotion, convincing the audience that a lesser Anoa'i could sit on the throne the real tribal chief had built. He held that seat with a version of the bloodline built on obedience rather than blood loyalty, which is precisely why it collapsed the moment someone tougher showed up. That someone was Fatu. Before WWE, he spent years as one of the most respected high flyers in the 600-pound weight class professional wrestling has ever produced, a cousin to the Anoa'i family in real life, who arrived already carrying legitimacy that Solo had to manufacture through booking. When Fatu entered the bloodline, the group stopped being Solo's enforcement squad and started being his replacement. The Samoan Werewolf nickname fits him because he wrestles like something feral got let out of a cage, and every gyration after a big move is him telling the locker room he knows exactly how much fear he generates. Jey Uso and Jimmy Uso, meanwhile, have lived an entirely different bloodline story. Jey left the group first, turned babyface, built the Yeet movement into one of the loudest crowd reactions in the company, and has main evented WrestleMania. Jimmy stayed loyal to Roman Reigns far longer, taking the harder, more thankless path, before eventually reuniting with his brother against the very faction he used to enforce for. Watching the two of them fight alongside Fatu tonight against a bloodline splinter led by the man who once controlled them both is a direct continuation of a rivalry that has been building for years. Royce Keys is the newest name in this mix, and his backstory gives the match a different kind of weight. Before WWE, he spent years in AEW as Powerhouse Hobbs, where he held the TNT Championship and the World Trios Championship and built a reputation as one of the most physically dominant competitors on that roster. He walked away from that success to sign with WWE, made his surprise entrance in the Royal Rumble this past January, and spent months wrestling in relative obscurity before WWE finally put him on SmackDown television in April. Since then, he has been positioned as a powerhouse, looking to prove himself against the roster's biggest names. And tonight is the clearest sign yet that WWE trusts him in a featured spot against a motivated Bloodline. Landing a power slam through the timekeeper's area against Jacob Fatu on national television is the kind of moment a career gets built on, and it puts him directly in business with two former world champions in Knight and Solo. Step back from the individual resumes and look at where this leaves the roster hierarchy. Jacob Fatu and the Usos remain the most cohesive trio on SmackDown, and one loss in a non-title six-man does nothing to change how thoroughly WWE has invested in them as its top faction heading into the summer. What changes is the perception of Solo Sikoa. A man who was positioned a year ago as the top threat to Roman Reigns' legacy is now winning tag matches by leaning on LA Knight and a newcomer, rather than commanding a faction of his own. That is a demotion in everything but name, and it repositions Knight as the dominant personality in this trio, regardless of who scored the pinfall. For Keys, simply surviving a barrier spot with Fatu and coming out on the winning side is the kind of credibility WWE rarely hands to a wrestler 4 months into his run on the main roster. Which brings us to where this goes next. The hesitation before that hug is not going to resolve itself quietly, and WWE knows it. Expect Solo Sikoa to keep leaning on Knight as the summer card takes shape, and expect Knight to keep making it clear that he is doing Solo a favor rather than pledging loyalty to him. The version of this story that gets the crowd talking is the one where Solo eventually asks for more than Knight is willing to give, whether that's help reclaiming the Bloodline name or backup in a program against Fatu directly, and Knight finally says no on camera. On the other side, Jacob Fatu and the Usos have no reason to let a non-title loss slow them down heading toward the next premium live event, and a rematch with actual stakes, whether that's titles or a stipulation tied to the Bloodline name itself, is the obvious next step. Royce Keys benefits either way. A strong showing here sets him up as a credible option in the United States Championship picture, especially if WWE wants a fresh challenger who has already proven he can hang physically with the roster's most dangerous trio. So here's what I want to know from you. Was that hesitation before the hug night telling us this alliance has an expiration date? Or is there something more calculated underneath it? Drop your read in the comments, because I don't think we've seen the last of this particular tension, and I'm not convinced Solo Sikoa has a plan for what happens when LA Knight decides he's done being useful to him.